I'm Marty Wilkinson with the PeaceGiver Project, and this is my guest, Katie Hansen. And you can find us at thepeacegiverproject.com or at PeaceGiver Project on Instagram, or obviously Facebook as well. Thus far, we've gone back and forth. We've had a dialogue, fairly open conversation, had some questions submitted. Basically, it's just a question and answer, a very open forum between us. And it's all centered around the various forms of domestic abuse, which doesn't get talked about. It's not fun to talk about. Definitely not fun for me to talk about as a reformed abuser. And it's at any rate, our purpose is to help people. Our purpose is to take the aim off of people. We don't want anybody to feel attacked, neither the survivors or anyone who's been abusive. Basically, we just want you to take a look, hear the questions, and if anything resonates with you, maybe it warrants a closer look. So, Katie, do you have your first question ready?
I do. I'm going to throw it at you. I thought of another one while you were talking.
Really?
So I'm going to throw it at you.
Okay,
so let's line it back a little bit. So in my situation, obviously we talked about the fact that it was physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, all those. And while these things are happening, right? So let it be the mental abuse or even physical abuse. What is it exactly that is going through your head when you are harming the person that you're supposed to love?
I can't speak for everybody. The only thing I'm an expert on is my story.
Mm-hmm.
I was highly intoxicated every time when I say highly, it's during the height of my alcoholism, I was drinking between a fifth to a fifth and a half of hard liquor per day. Usually from, I didn't drink, I did a little bit in the mornings, but it got heavier in the afternoons. So the short answer is I don't actually remember it. It created a bigger challenge for me on accountability level, because that meant that I had to ask her first. Getting someone who's been abusive. Most people who've been abusive do not ask the question. I found, and I'm no exception. At the beginning of it, I would deny that I ever did it. Oh, that was all in your imagination. It never happened. And it happened. It did. And then, so I don't remember. That meant that I had to go back to her and ask her exactly what happened. The main turning point event was when I tackled her and I broke her hip. Mm-hmm. And eventually I spent time in jail. I did 200 hours of community service for it, but I didn't remember it, and I had to go back to feel any weight of the accountability. I had to go through and ask her, and I didn't even think to ask her until a month or two later. And I'm kind of filling in the blanks right now, but in truth, I'm sure she wanted me to ask sooner than I did, but I didn't want to talk about it because that meant that I had to feel the weight of my actions, and heaven forbid I do that. Then I realized that when sentencing came about, they were going to sentence me to take a course, and I knew they would. When I got to the course, by this time, and this was a couple months later, I actually I knew that I'd done something wrong and I wanted to get better. And it was shocking to me. It was a 16-hour class, which was so sad that, and it wasn't all men, it was probably, it was 6 or 7 men and 2 or 3 women that were in there, and they were all court ordered. Nobody was taking notes, nobody was paying attention, nobody answered questions. I was the only one that was there to learn. And I wasn't there on court order yet. I knew that I would be, but I actually wanted to change at that point. And it was sad to me how nobody's going to change their behavior by spending, you know, a couple hours a day for 16 weeks. Pardon me, a couple hours, one day a week for 16 weeks going to a class, especially if they're not engaging and didn't want to be there. So that's when I started asking questions, really wanting to feel the weight of it, because they talked about those things in that class. They did talk, the information was actually valuable information in there. It just required pondering and digging. There was no time for that in the class. And the rest of the guys in there were just checking boxes so they could appease the court.
So you're saying, though, let's say physically abusive. One night you were super intoxicated. You woke up the next morning and you saw this person that you were supposed to love that trusts you that's broken one way or another. And there wasn't anything that resonated with you in that moment when you saw her, or you just ignored it like it didn't happen?
I was in jail.
I'm talking like any other time.
You know what? We'll say the first... I broke the first domestic, the first one was, I broke a phone. Mm-hmm. For those of you out there, you can't break a phone. You can't disrupt a communication device. It's against the law. It is. Wow. And, but there's a reason for that. You know, at first I was bitter about it and I played the victim, and I wasn't a victim. My grandfather had just passed away and we had a rough relationship, and I had drank heavy that night. And I broke her phone, and it wasn't because I was just grabbing the nearest object and slinging it against the wall. Mm-hmm. And we were arguing, and she ran out of the house, and she ran a couple miles because she was scared because I was yelling. Mm-hmm. And that still leaves a mark. People, you know, when they think domestic abuse, they think violence, hitting, and the words. Personally, I would rather be hit than called the horrible names, because the bruises go away, and somehow the words just they linger for a very long time. At least they do with me. Mm-hmm. So, and I did call her. I called her really horrible names, and she was scared, so she ran to a friend's house, and the next day, you know, I played the victim. I played it off like, oh, well, it was just a fluke. My grandpa died, you know, I was looking for any excuse not to take accountability. Mm-hmm. Any, at all. To just shut it off and not own any of it. And, which is sad because that was the beginning of, you know, that was the beginning of the creation of a culture of abuse within our house, between the yelling, the throwing stuff, the hitting, all of it. It started with that phone. Yeah, but I did my best to justify it and play it off, and that's not what happened. You know, a typical, you know, the term I believe is gaslighting. Mm-hmm. You know, that's all, you know, that didn't happen. It was your imagination. It happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's manipulative, and that's when I was abused. That was the ugliest part of it to me, was the manipulation, the feeling, oh, well, it's your fault. See what you made me do. Well, it's your fault. I'm like, well, that's, you know, it's one thing to hurt me. It's a whole nother thing for you to try and tell me that it's my fault and I caused you to raise hands to lay hands on me. Mm-hmm. And which is, you know, we both know was a lie. And it was a lie when I did it too.
When you're in the situation, and I always talked about that before, when you're in the situation and you're manipulated to believe that, you truly believe it. Yeah. So once you're there, you don't even start to ask why anymore. You just know that it's your fault. So you don't ask.
It becomes the new normal. Mm-hmm. It's sad and scary. Mm-hmm. It's scary.
It's very scary.
I remember there was a time, and I hope, I won't name names, but I was at a pool. I was at a pool one time, and at a place I was staying, and there was a gal there that I didn't know her, but I could tell that she had 2 of her kids there, and I could tell the man that was with her was not her husband. And the way he was treating those kids made my blood boil. And he, he would do things like tell the boy to, get out there and swim, and he wouldn't let him have a floaty. My son had a floaty. He didn't want to swim anymore. I'm like, you can use my boy's floaty. I'm fine. And he was so abrupt and gruff with him, and he would shake him, physically shake him. And that's when I'm like, I couldn't not say anything. When he walked off, I told this guy, I said, I don't really know you at all. I don't know you at all. But I can tell you this, if anybody did that to my child, it would take a lot to undo what I did, because our job is to keep those kids safe. And that man, if he hasn't already laid hands on your kids and you, it would really surprise me. But if he hasn't done it already, he's gonna. Because there's no, accountability in that little kid. It was, see what you made me do, his fault, it was all, and the little girl too. And I just wanted to, circle the wagons around that kid. That makes my blood boil when I see something like that happen.
Yeah.
At any rate.
Okay.
But it was jarring to her. The only reason why I say that is that had become her normal.
Mm-hmm.
That, and when she said that later, she she said, thank you for saying that to me, because I'd become so used to being treated that way. 5 years ago, I would have never stood for that. And until you said something, it's like I woke her, I shook her awake. I'm like, this is not normal. This is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. That was the, we've kept in touch, and she left him.
That's
and
good.
they haven't, and they haven't spoken since. That's really my only point to that, is sometimes it takes, someone speaking up and to ring your bell and say, this is not normal. Mm-hmm. Or at least point out, hey, is it possible this is really unhealthy?
Mm-hmm. No. It's hard, though. It's one of those things that you do have to be careful with, because in my situation, anybody would tell me, and I would get defensive, and I would get angry, and it would be, I knew that if I was talking to that person, I would get in trouble from him. If that was seen. So it was more of, no, I'm totally fine. We're fine. It's nothing normal. I defended him because I knew if we went home, I would be in trouble if he saw me having a conversation with somebody else.
And did that create a lot of isolation with your family?
Oh, tons of isolation. I learned very quickly how to deflect, how to answer questions with what I thought was, not out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
But come to find out, my family knew who I was before. So then for me to act that way was completely out of the ordinary. So they knew, but in my mind, I was doing what I had to do to keep a situation from happening or getting worse when I got home, because I knew in the back of my mind that whatever I was going to say here, if he asked me questions and I just said, oh no, they were just talking about the kids, his mind would go to the worse. And then when I got home, it would be even worse for me. Now, no, never hurt my kids. Never, not physically hurt my kids, but there is that fine line that has to be very careful. Because if he saw an interaction with somebody else, let it be another male that's at the pool, whatever, family, anything, it could be deadly when you get home.
Yeah. And even if it's not, I think that's sometimes, I wouldn't say it's more dangerous, but I'm sure it's more common, where couples, they one spouse or the other, when they're in a family situation, they're playing that game. Oh, everything's fine, when the spouse is outwardly, I had that, the spouse was outwardly verbally abusive in front of my family, and they knew me, and they knew that I wasn't, I don't like confrontation, but I'm not afraid of it either. Yeah. And then they could see my I changed, they probably saw you change too. It's like, holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
My gut tells me, it was, who's this Katie? I don't know this Katie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know this version of Katie.
Yep.
And it ultimately came to the point where, and maybe it did with you too, where it wasn't healthy for them to be around that version. I mean, they were like, well, they stopped inviting me to things because I came with baggage. There was another person that was going to come, and they were going to show up drunk or drunk and abusive and or inappropriate. It's interesting. And then you get home and it's claws out. It's like, oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to catch hell. I already know I'm going to catch hell. And the ride home is just pins and needles. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not physical, you know that you're going to get yelled at, called names, horrible names. And it might drag on for hours. And the only thing, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling. But, it comes to a point where the only thing you can do is just shut up and hope that the storm stops soon. Mm-hmm. But I've been on both sides of that. I've also been the one that was, were you talking to, what did you talk to your friend about? Mm-hmm. Were you talking about me? Because I knew that I was doing bad things. I knew that I was being, at that time, I was being a bad person.
Yeah.
And then, today it's like, well, geez, if you're so afraid of that, wouldn't you ask yourself for a moment, maybe there's something there. Common sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and for me, I learned very quickly that my parents or my family invited me places because I know that they wanted to keep an eye on me. And my ex was not physically abusive, but very manipulative with me when I was around my family. So I learned that the whole way home, I just sit quietly. And then when I'd get home, I learned that I had to do the things that he wanted to do because then it made it so that I wouldn't get hurt. So he wanted to sit downstairs and drink a magnum of wine and play his video games. I'd sit down on the couch with him while he played video games until he got to that point. And then, for that time frame, I was okay. As soon as that one, you never know when that one glass of wine is going to hit and it's going to turn him. But I learned very quickly that if I did the things he wanted me to do, I was okay. So I would get home, put my kids to bed, make sure they're okay, and then I would go sit on the couch, and I hated it. And I would just I don't drink like that. I was not a drinker, and that was my safety net. That was getting to the point where I knew something wasn't right, and I was starting in my head to understand that things weren't right. But there's still that fine line where you're like, oh, he doesn't mean it. He still loves me. But then you see the other side. So I started seeing that I was doing those things to keep him happy. And then as soon as that one glass of wine hit, it was the end of the world. So, but I found myself doing the things he wanted me to do just to protect myself.
Did you ever find yourself hoping that he would just pass out?
Oh, that was every night.
Let's hope that he gets drunk quickly, so there's not a crisis.
There would be nights that I would, here you go, let me get you another glass, because I knew that that's what he was getting to. Yeah. Right? But then the other part of it is, okay, there's gonna, if I was there where he could see me, he knew I wasn't doing anything wrong, which I never was, right? I would just be upstairs watching TV, but in his mind, I'm talking to all these other men, or I'm doing all these other things. Right. And so if I was there where he could see me, it wasn't going to get bad. So then he could pass out. But then the other side of that is, well, if he passes out and I'm not there, then I'm in trouble. So do I try and get him upstairs? So, I hoped he passed out all the time. And then it would be me, either him laying next to me, passed out, and me bawling my eyes out because, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Or I would sit on the couch, and I don't think there was a night that I didn't cry for many, many years because I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I had 2 little kids that looked up to this man, and, that was my family. I was going to protect it in every way I could. But once that realization hit, then everything changes.
Yeah. I've noticed it I've got several buddies that the rules are a little reversed, but there's no alcohol involved. It's interesting. How many times when men are abusive, there's alcohol involved, and with women, I don't know. Have you noticed that? Have you had any exposure to that? With my buddies, it's more verbal abuse, not more. It's solely verbal abuse, but there's no alcohol involved, and they're just hoping that they get involved. If the sleeping pill kicks in, the Ambien. Oh, here, have you taken your Ambien yet? And it's interesting. It's interesting, and I know we focused a lot today on some of the yuck and exposing it, and it's necessary. We have to talk about it. The next one, I'd like to talk about some of the solutions to avoiding. Some of the solutions, if you want to keep it together, some of the solutions, some possible solutions, and, more often than not, if it's as bad as it has been with you and I, someone's got to go. And what that looks like, and, how we each did it, in a safe manner.
As safe as can be.
Yeah, as safe as can be. It's safe is relative. Again, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do like, share if you found value in this. Again, you can find us at PeaceGiverProject.com or at Instagram or at Facebook as well. Thanks so much.